everybody. Welcome back to Seasons Ebb and Flow. I am very excited about tonight's conversation. I will be interviewing Amy Goodblatt. She is a divorce attorney in the Orlando area and a divorce mediator. I actually met her through my divorce because she was the mediator for my divorce, and she was quite amazing. I felt very professional, and we accomplished so much in just 4 hours and completed the majority of the divorce in that mediation. And I decided to reach out to her and see if she would be open to answering questions for us. And she said yes. So I'm going to turn it over to her and let her tell us a little bit about her years as a lawyer and mediator.
Hi, I'm Amy Goodblatt. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Lee. It makes me feel good to know that what came out of the mediation wasn't just the outcome of a divorce, but a lasting friendship between us. And I think that's really, and a professional relationship. And I think that leads me into, one of the things that I want to talk to you a little bit about me and my professional career as a mediator and as a divorce attorney, and also as a collaborative divorce attorney, to talk to people about high conflict divorce, a little bit about some solutions and built-in benefits of mediation to help you get through a really stressful and difficult process. So I've been a lawyer since 1985. I have done probably over 10,000 cases in one form or another. I've mediated over 2,500 cases. Many of them are high conflict. Some are small cases with a lot of conflict for emotional reasons. Some are high conflict because of just financial reasons. But they're all sort of the same in this one aspect, which is that people have impediments to resolution. And so what I want to talk a little bit about is how mediation provides a bridge to resolution for people in high conflict situations. There are many, many, many safety features built into mediation that make it so much easier for people in a high conflict situation to be able to discuss and resolve their issues in a safe and professional manner and in a satisfactory manner. So the concept behind mediation to begin with is self-determination, not judge determination, not lawyer determination. And I try to say that at the beginning of all my mediations, that if the two people who are getting divorced or in a post-modification situation could come up with a resolution that works for the two of them and their families, that's the best possible outcome you can have. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, no matter how much your lawyer cares about you or the judge spends time with you, they go on to the next case, right? So the judge goes on and says, next case, they have thousands of them. If you have a good lawyer, they have hundreds of them. So at the end of the day, while they care, they're not living with the outcome of your case for the rest of your life.
Right.
And if you can have your fingers in the pot and really be the decision maker as to what it will be acceptable to you in a divorce, that is going to help you be more satisfied with the outcome. You won't feel as detached from the process. So court, in addition to being sort of an intimidating process, is a detached process for most litigants because you do come in, your lawyer makes a lot of arguments, a lot of witnesses speak, the judge just talks a lot, and you're a very small part of that. So when your input is as a witness, you're not there to tell the judge, here's everything I want. You're going to have a limited role. And your lawyer is going to run that show. They're going to lay out an agenda. And your role may be 20% of what the judge is going to hear. They're going to hear from the other side, various witnesses, the law. And a lot of people feel left out in that process. And then when it's all done, the judge tells you what to do. Okay, so you have very little input except to say, this is why I'm right. I think the other side is wrong. Mediation flips that 180 degrees. And it works this way. In a mediation, what happens is the judge, it's 180 degrees different from court because the control is in the hands of the people who are going to live with the outcome. So the participants in that mediation, and by the way, sometimes it's just the parents, sometimes it's extended family members, sometimes it's even a child or an adult child, but generally just the participants have control of the outcome of the case. They are the decision makers. So everyone's role changes. So in a mediation, nothing is going to happen unless the two of you agree to it. The participants must agree to that outcome. It doesn't happen in court. A lot of things happen in court that the lawyers don't agree to, the parties don't agree to, and your lawyer's role is very different. They are there to advise you, to give you advice. What's likely to happen in court? Is this a good offer? Here's how to negotiate. But they're serving in an advisory capacity to you as the main feature in your divorce to say, here's what I think you should do, or here's what I think a court will do. But we're going to defer to you. We're going to say, this is your life. You make that decision. And frankly, I think that gives some dignity to a very stressful process. It
Yeah.
brings control back to people. It helps your self-esteem. You feel like you're on a level playing field, and the fear factor is out because nothing's going to happen that you don't agree to.
Mhm.
Statistically, there have been a number of studies done that people who resolve their cases through mediation and other dispute resolution methods come back to court less to modify them. They're held in contempt a lot less, and they don't file as many motions to enforce because, frankly, once you've made that decision to sign and agree to something, you've gone through an evaluative process. You've said, okay, it's not perfect, but I've got enough that I can live with this.
Right.
And it really puts the people at issue back in the process. So you're not a bystander watching your own divorce in the
Mhm.
middle of it.
Right.
And mediation has some built-in, what I would say, safety features. So in many mediations, the parties are separated at various times during the mediation. We may start out together and talk about the agenda or the rules of mediation. But for example, if you've been a victim of domestic violence and you can't make decisions in the presence of the perpetrator, or you're very upset because of infidelity or some other issue that's gone on in your marriage, you can, we now use Zoom quite a bit. We do both virtual and in-person mediations, but in either way, you can go into a separate room and not have to eyeball the person who's making you
Right.
feel inferior, who's dominated you perhaps during the relationship, or perhaps you just have to vent. Perhaps you feel like you've been bled dry, that you have no money left, or that your spouse did terrible things to you. You can make decisions in privacy. If you want to be upset, if you want to cry, if you want to be angry, you don't have to show your face to that other person, and you can let your hair down and relax in a different environment where you can spread out, you can walk around, you can use the restroom. It's just a more comfortable way to be able to resolve things and get what you need. If you need to walk every 15 minutes, if you need to smoke, okay? So if you need to drink coffee, if you need to eat, if you need to stand up and sit down, I've seen it all.
Yeah.
I've seen people,
I'm sure.
I did one very hotly contested mediation where there was a party who was former military, had PTSD. Clearly, all the parties knew that. And he got permission from the people in the mediation to have his former CO sit in on the mediation by telephone because he needed that reassurance that he could do this, that he
Um,
could get through this, that he was
wow.
really struggling. And you can't do that in court, right? The judge isn't going to let you have an outside advisor. But we were able to structure mediation so that he had what he needed to be able to make decisions. He needed a break. We took a
Mhm.
dinner break. That we went through dinner in that particular case. When you go to court, the judge does give you lunch, but they tell you how much time it is. I've had mediations where the parties have said, let's meet for 3 hours in the morning. Let's break for 2 or 3 hours at noon and come back at 2 o'clock. Everyone needs to breathe a little bit.
Right. Right. So, when one side is really willing to, some of my clients, what I'm dealing with from their perspective is they really want to finish in mediation. And it seems like, at least from what they're telling me, the other side feels like dragging out the process, for one, makes their life difficult, and dragging out the process and pushing towards litigation, maybe they feel like my client will break or give in or just say, fine, throw in the towel.
Sure.
And it's almost like the other party wants to go to litigation. If, for example, that party's lawyer, do lawyers sometimes say, why are you doing this? You're going to end up in court? Or do they recognize their client wants to go to court and they just realize they have to take them there?
So one of the things that people have to understand about lawyers, you have a duty to represent your client. And in many cases, your client can be distasteful, someone you don't particularly agree with. Now, no one's, you're not supposed to do anything unethical, but that's a pretty broad range of people. So
Yes.
there are people who you may not think they're the best parent. They haven't done anything negligent, but you can clearly see that the other parent is a terrific parent. And this person is a, once a year visiting parent, but they want 50-50 time sharing. But you have to be careful. You have a duty to advocate for your client. A good lawyer will use mediation as an opportunity. Sometimes what happens is you're representing your client and the other lawyer is representing his or her client in a high conflict situation. And the mediator is a saving grace. They're like a lifeline because the
Yes.
mediator is neutral. And I can say, for example, I've never met you folks before today. I'm being paid equally by both sides, but I have a question for you. How many times have you taken your child to the doctor in the last 6 years? Or since you've been separated, how many times a month or a week do you call your child? Or do you ever go to the school and visit for parent teacher night? Those are the kinds of things the judge is going to look at. But I can say, oh, that's an interesting point of view. Do you have a case that says that? Or I can help the lawyers who are doing their job and don't want to show their client that perhaps that their client has a weak position and say, tell me, lawyer so-and-so, do you have a case that says that? That's a technique I use. I understand your client wants that, but I've never seen that successfully advocated. And that gives a lawyer the opportunity to say, I know it's a loser position. My client really wants this. I have to do that. And that will allow me to help that lawyer say to the
Okay.
client, listen, client, I understand, but you don't want to waste your money going to court for something you don't have it snowball's chance of winning, right?
Right.
That's a
Right.
waste of money. You'd better off spending it on yourself, your children, college, all of those
No.
things. But it's some lawyers, many lawyers have different styles. Some lawyers have very good client control and they could say you're just wrong. Okay.
Mhm.
But a lot of lawyers are pleasers, people pleasers. And if you're always telling your client they're wrong, you may feel like you're not going to have much of a practice because most people have unrealistic expectations when they come into a divorce. Some lawyers are better at educating their clients. Others feel my job is to just get you through the process. And if you lose, you lose, you win, and that's the way it is. So I use it as an opportunity to say, look, I'm an outsider and here's what I see. So tell me, lawyer, right? And that gives a lawyer an entree to be able to say, I've been trying to tell my client this for months. Thank you for saying that. Or
Yes.
it unsettles people just a little bit. Or why do you think your spouse is acting that way? Why do you think, how would you feel if you ran off with your spouse's best friend? I had this one happen in a divorce, right? So you're saying they're being unreasonable and they won't let you see the kids and they're very bitter. I'm like, well, not only did you, cheat on your spouse, but it was with her best friend, right? And that means there's two bonds of trust that were broken. The bond of trust you have with your spouse, and then the person she would ordinarily confide in can't be there for her anymore. So
Yeah.
how do we, can you see that from another perspective? Can we turn that around? So use a little psychology in all of this and mediation, but there's so many, lawyers can come to the mediator and say, look, help me, right? My client's a pushover. They agree to everything. Toughen them up, So
Right.
sometimes that happens. You've got the people who want it over with at all cost. And I'll
Exactly.
say, negotiation strategy, not so fast, right?
Mm.
Don't give so much in the first pass. I know you want it over with, but this is a little bit of a process. You don't want to beat your bottom line right to start with. Start over here. So the mediator can help direct
Mm.
people. Now, if the lawyer truly is, there are fewer of these lawyers than you think, but they do exist, who just is in it for the money, right? They just want to drag everything out, go to trial. That's a good question to ask your attorney, right?
Mhm.
Who is this attorney? Do you know them well? Is this a habit? I mean, I can think of one or two lawyers that I mediate for, and they never settle. They just don't. The only one case I settled for a particular attorney I know in town who never settles. He went to the restroom, and his client looked at me on Zoom and said, "Oh my God, I need to settle this. I can't pay his fees anymore.
Oh my
They won't let me
gosh.
settle it." So I said, "When your lawyer comes back, tell them that." Just
Yes.
say, please, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm not going to say it for you, but I'm going to prompt you, say, hey, lawyer Joe, while you were out, your client said something to me. Do you want to mind repeating that? Because I feel like you need to say that to your attorney. And they may be scared, but once I put them out there, they'll say, I really need to get this done. You need to do whatever you need to do to get it done. So there are tricks of the trade that make things happen, but there's so much room for self-expression in mediation that I think
Mhm.
that's why I think it's a good process.
Yeah, I mean, I know, because my ex and I are now amicable, but obviously during mediation, we were in separate rooms. I don't know if you remember that. We
Yep.
started together and then you were like, okay, I want us to separate. And I think part of that was his attorney's choice, the choice. But he told me years after the divorce that like an hour into mediation, his attorney just kept saying, we're going to court. And my ex did not want to go to court and realized his attorney was not in his favor, wanting to have his back. He wanted to make money. And my attorney, my ex stopped listening to his attorney. Thank God. Thank God. But I'm sure that's not always the case. It's so interesting that you said that the client wanted to end it and they were scared to like tell the attorney, I can't do this anymore. Like it's the dynamic between the client and the attorney is a whole nother relationship of,
There was,
that they're navigating through this scary process.
and you have to express yourself to your attorney before you get there. Some people are looking for an attorney to do all the work for them, like they're afraid and don't want to speak up. But ultimately, you need to convey how you want this to go to your lawyer. And if you don't have a lawyer who's going to have your back and do things the way you want them done, maybe you need a new lawyer, right? But as like, and you mentioned about your husband, so ex-husband. So in this process, he was still able to resolve because he didn't
Mhm.
have to fire his lawyer, hire somebody new and start over.
Right.
He had another avenue for resolution. And I
Mhm.
am required to convey as a mediator all offers made in the other room. So
Mhm.
I just said this yesterday to someone in mediation. I would provided an offer and the lawyer kept talking over her client and saying, no, that's a no, Amy. That's a no. That's no. I said, I would like to hear from your client.
Mhm.
She's perfectly capable of talking. Just, I'm not going to say in the other room, you have to give me permission. I understand as a lawyer, you don't want to ruin your strategy, but talk to me a little bit. How do you feel about this offer? What are your thoughts about this? Just trying to draw someone out.
Yes.
And because sometimes, and then sometimes lawyers get flustered. They don't like that. There's some lawyers are very controlling and that's how they built their reputation. But just feeling like
Mm,
someone's listening to you is really helpful, right?
absolutely.
And not all, I mean, a lot of some lawyers are the opposite. They're completely checked out during mediation. You're looking to your lawyer for help and they're working on
Right.
someone else's file. I mean, that does
Right.
happen. Or they're thinking, oh, we're in mediation, we'll let the mediator do all the work. And that's
Right.
okay. That I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to help you express yourself. So sometimes, so you need to kind of ask your lawyer when
Right.
we go to the, like, being in a mediation is like being in a play, right? Everyone's
Mhm.
got a role. What's
Yes.
your role going to be in this mediation? Are you going to do all the talking to the mediator? Am I going to be asked for my input? Many times the attorney and the client will say to me, "Can you step out for a minute? I need to talk to my client alone." People get overwhelmed,
Mm,
and I find that I have a tendency, maybe sometimes when I'm talking to the lawyer, I'm trying to convince the lawyer that this is why this is a good offer. This is why your client should do it. The client feels left out maybe a little bit.
oh,
So the
interesting.
attorney will say they have that long bond with the client. I don't I met them that day. Sometimes they'll say,
Right.
let me talk to my client for a few minutes. Can you step out? And I'm never offended. That's great.
Yeah.
And you can change
So,
it up every case.
yeah, it's very interesting because I think when I went into mediation, I myself had kind of like done soul searching and I really knew what I thought was a fair kind of what I felt like I will leave today if I can get this. And I hadn't like discussed that in detail at all with my lawyer, but um I guess I felt very empowered. And I know the reason I connected with you and felt a relationship with you was we interacted the whole day and he sat next to me and interjected here and there, but it was really us working together. But I guess that's because I felt like this was my process and I wanted to manage it. Maybe I'm a bit more of a control freak than I realize sometimes, but it makes me realize some people, their lawyers are doing more of the talking in mediation. I assumed everybody kind of went through mediation the way I did, where it was
No.
like my process for me with my binder and, you know, my goals and soul searching. And I really felt like what I thought would be fair was fair, and that, but yeah, it makes me realize every mediation must be so unique and different because there's so many players.
Well, every family is unique and different. So Lee
Yeah.
used a really important word, goals. So this comes also in collaborative practice as well as mediation. I try to get a sense of what that client's goals are. And
Hmm.
generally, sometimes it's, I want to have my kids around me as much as possible. It's really just sort of a very general goal, or it could be a very
Mhm.
specific goal. I want my house. I need my house. Like without my house, I'm not, I would give away the retirement account and everything else. I don't want to sell this house. It's my security, right? I've lived here. I've decorated every inch of this house. It's very important to me. And
Yeah.
so the goals of one party aren't necessarily adverse to the goals of the other party. You find that out over time.
Mhm.
If I say
Yeah.
to someone tell me not just I want, $1,000 a month in child support, but tell me when this is over, what things are important to you? I want my kids to go to college. I want to make
Mhm.
sure that I can afford to pay my bills, right? Or you're saying I want to make sure that after I pay my spouse and kids that I have enough money to live on, right? Those are good.
Mhm.
If people haven't prepared you that way, I want to do that for you. I want to know when I go in the other room and talk to the other side, or many times we stay together, what are your goals? How can I
Right.
make each of you achieve as many of your goals? You won't get everything, right? You can't have two
Mhm.
perfect, you wouldn't be sitting there. But sometimes your goals are not mutually exclusive. You can both achieve your goals. It just requires rewiring your thinking a little bit.
Mhm. Yeah, in one of our previous sessions that we did an in-person Q&A for clients, you said that there are so many creative solutions that lawyers can help you come up with when they have years under their belt, that you think the house is a sticking point, but there's so many ways that you can kind of slice the pie to make it work for both parties. And
Right. Some people come in thinking everything has to get divided down the middle. But sometimes people will say, I'll waive my support if you will make the payments on the house. And that person would say, oh, I'll be happy to make the payments on the house because my credit will be good. I just don't want to write you a check because you're not really good with money. And I would rather, and someone else might say, well, no, that's controlling. You might say, I don't care. I just want my house paid for. I'm good
right,
with that.
right.
So it's really important, and judges can't do all of these things. So there are many things you can do in mediation that judges can't do. So here's one for you this comes up more often than you think. Pets. So
Oh.
under Florida law, pets are not people. They're property. Some
Mhm.
states they are people, but not in Florida. So if you have some people, their pets are their children, right? It's very important to them.
Totally.
Judges can't do that. If you go to trial, the judge is going to say, you get the dog, you get the dog. It's just like a piece of furniture, or the dog
Wow.
is sold. In
Wow.
mediation, I have done time sharing agreements for animals. I have done support for animals in mediation and
Wow.
dignified that.
Hmm.
So yes, and to these people, those animals were their children. Or I've done
Yeah.
mediations where the pet goes back and forth with the children.
Mhm.
So it's the children's pet, 3 or 4 kids. It helps
Right.
them when they go to the new home. So maybe
Totally.
maybe daddy has a new spouse or a new girlfriend and they're nervous going to the house, but if they bring their dog with them, they
Mhm.
might feel just a little more comfortable going over there because they've got a familiar someone to hug and to bring with them and help
Right.
them adjust to that. So there are lots and a judge can't do it. It's not that they're mean or cruel. They're not allowed to by statute. If you go to
Right.
trial, they just award the animal unless you agree. They award the
Mhm.
animal to one person or the other. So that's one example. Um,
Mhm.
Time sharing schedules. People make a lot of things about 50-50. It's week on, week off. It's this is that. In reality, if you work, 4 nights a week late, you know, is there a big difference if your child sees you 3 overnights a week and the other parent 4 overnights a week? Your children are not going to know the difference in that one overnight a week.
Right.
But just to say you're exactly equal, I mean, the idea is to be present in your child's life. Or maybe in the
Mhm.
summertime, you have more time and it's less structured. You can spend more than half of the summer with a child. And maybe maybe you live 100 miles away, so you make up for some of that time over vacation time. You can have
Mhm.
different schedules for different children. You might say
Right.
your 2-year-old has different needs than your 15-year-old.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of things you can do in mediation that are unique to your family that you would do if you weren't getting divorced, right? We treat our
Right.
children differently. Our family
Yes.
is different. Our
Mhm.
religion is different. I had a case with guns recently. So these folks, the mom had moved out of state and her children, and they were young, under 10, had knives and guns. And I think I'm not supposed to be biased, but I think my eyebrows must have gone up. And the father wanted to know if the children were going to be bought, if the grandparents were going to give them guns. And the mom explained to me that they live in a rural part of the country and they shoot squirrels, and
Mhm.
that's an activity that they do,
Right.
and that they're supervised, and that they bring knives to school, and the school permits this. And she showed me the school policy that it's
Wow. Yeah.
so, everything is different, depending on your situation. And the dad said, yes, we both come from this rural part of the country, and my children can have guns, but I want to be advised in advance. I want to know so that I know they've been given them, who gave them to them, what type of gun it is, so I can talk to them about gun safety on my time with them. So it's
Interesting.
very, I mean, so people's beliefs are very different, and we all bring to the table our own implicit
Yeah.
biases. In fact,
Absolutely.
uh,
Culture,
people so now
expectations.
I've seen a lot of transgendered youth, gender dysphoria, a lot of
Mhm.
families where a child comes to a parent and said, I am not the gender I was assigned at birth. And
Mm.
people struggle with that in different ways. Some families adapt better than others. Take some people longer to get on the train. How this family's going to handle that? That's a very private thing. How hard is
Mhm.
that to air those types of things in front of a stranger, a judge who might look like they're 150 years old and
Right.
like they're starchy and a bow tie, and maybe you don't feel comfortable expressing yourself that way. But in private, maybe you might have a little bit of an opportunity to say, I'm really scared for my child. They're taking hormones, or all these things are going to happen. The kids bully them at school. There are things
Mm.
we can do to help, agree on counselors and therapists. And you don't have to get up and say the other parent's a bad parent because they're not on board with how you feel, right?
Right.
So
Right. Coming to that, like, one of my clients is dealing with some parental alienation where they know because the other parent has much more financial capabilities that, there's a little bit of, they're feeling like there's no way they can compete, and they're not trying to compete, but they feel like the other parent is almost trying to like
sure.
bribe the kid into wanting to spend more time there. And how do you as a lawyer help your clients when they are struggling with feeling like the other client is trying to alienate them away from their children?
So that's not an unusual fact pattern, or buying your children, right? So the parent who they have all the fancy toys at one house and the
Yeah.
other house is much more modest. That happens more often than you think. So that's the first thing I'll tell people, is that
Mhm.
it's not unusual, but children see past that.
I
To
know. Yeah.
initially the toys are great, but they see who spends time with them. So yes,
Mhm.
on a superficial level, an 8-year-old may not be able to understand the complexity of parental love, and they may be
Mhm.
swayed a little bit, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's a person who tucks them in at night. And psychological studies have shown this. There's several good books written on parental alienation, and one was written by a local psychologist here in Orlando, Dr. Deborah Day, along with I believe it's Teresa Parnell or Barbara Kelly. I can't remember which other psychologist.
Okay.
One of the things about parental alienation, people kick this term around a lot, and I read the book a few times. And
Mm.
one of the things about parental alienation, it's not really parental alienation unless it works. So
Yes.
psychologists will tell you that people use it, attempted parental alienation. It's just bad parenting.
Yeah.
It's not true parental
Terrible.
alienation until you reach a point in which the child says, I don't like you, I'm not going. Then the parent
Mhm.
has been successful. But
Mhm.
I will tell people that whether you're speaking to a really good therapist, read some good literature, develop coping skills. So a lot of people, instead of coming to your lawyer who charges a lot more money than a therapist, right?
Mhm.
Seek out someone for what I call good coping skills for yourself, for
Mhm.
your children. They will help you in saying when you go to dad's house or when you're here, here's how. And it may be that you do some things differently at your house. So it's not, how do you diffuse this? If they say, "Oh, I like being at I'm using dad's house. Dad's house better. They have toys, games, or whatever." You don't have to
Mhm.
blow up and say dad's this or dad's that. There are tried and true methods that a psychologist or therapist can help you divert their
Mhm.
attention. Have fun things going on at your house. They don't have to cost a lot, but something
Right.
special for your child. Make them feel
Mhm.
special in your home. It's a
Right.
fear. Look, this is
Mhm.
truly a fear of parents when there is an
Mhm.
imbalance, a financial imbalance.
Right.
But
And
ultimately,
that's
people,
what with most of my clients, I remind them children feel love. And so as long as you are loving them and spending time with them, sure, they all love the glittery, shiny toys, but if they feel loved and enjoy your company, that's just as important to them. The glitter of the toys wears off very quickly.
people
But
show their
it is.
stripes. People show their stripes down the road.
Yeah, exactly. That's the other thing. By the time your kids get to teenage years, they are more insightful than most people think at observing if one parent is very manipulative or trying to paint the picture that the other parent's a terrible person. Another one of my clients is has they've tried mediation twice and not gotten very far. And they are now potentially leading to court, but they're going to have to do depositions beforehand. That's not something I'm super familiar with. What is the process and use of depositions before you go to court?
So there's two primary reasons that people take depositions. Number one is to get the other person's story under oath. It's called
Mm,
discovery. So you may have a hunch what the other person is going to say, but they're now going to be sworn in by a court reporter under oath saying,
yeah,
this is the reason I think I should be the primary parent of our children. I, I found roaches in the oven. You don't ever clean up the kitchen. The baby wasn't bathed for 6 days. Whatever those things are, you're saying them under oath. So if you come into court and say something different, you can impeach their credibility. It also
mm,
allows the lawyer to build their case because you hear a lot of hearsay, chatter. What are people going to say? So you lock someone into a story. You also find out the strength of your case. People say a lot of things on paper, and then when you ask them, so what does shared parenting mean to you? Or, what is the schedule you want for shared parenting under oath? And, why will this work? Or what are your work hours? If they lie, they've committed perjury. But
mm,
you could sometimes set them, but other times it's just merely to know, explain where this money went. I've seen a lot of cases where people tell me all this money disappeared. I didn't know where any of the money went during the marriage. And then you take their deposition and you find out there was large credit card debt. And they can show you that, yes, I cashed out a CD for $20,000. I paid off the J.C. Penney card, the Visa, the hospital bill, and just that other person just wasn't involved in the money. They just saw
right.
the withdrawal. And many times
Mhm.
people, their relationship is so broken
There's no
that they don't
community.
communicate. So a deposition is a good way to elicit and also to know the weaknesses. How does your client do as a witness? I'm interested in seeing my client in his or her deposition taken by the other side to see how he or
Mm,
she does as a witness. Like, how are they going to be on a witness stand? If this is how they are with a lawyer cross-examining with no judge, maybe
right.
they need some coaching on a witness stand. Maybe they're so nervous. I've got people, I prepare my witnesses for court by telling them tell the truth and so forth. Don't stretch for an answer. If you don't know, the answer is I don't know, or I don't know
Right.
without looking at something. May I refer to a note or something like that?
Mm,
And then you get them in a deposition and they're like, oh, yes, I think it was this. I'm not really sure. And they're speculating all, no matter how much preparation you have. So it gives
right.
me as a lawyer another opportunity to say, go read your deposition. Do you see how you answer this question? They asked
Mm,
you, what date this happened, and you gave them a date, a year, and a time that was completely wrong, right? So
Mhm.
don't answer if you don't know. People feel compelled to have an answer. It's okay.
Ah,
No one keeps a calendar in your head, right? So it's very
right.
helpful for you too. I mean, it's scary, but I think it's helpful for the people who are deposed to find out, hey, what's it going to be like being cross-examined by this other
Mhm.
lawyer? What's that going to feel like? And there are
Yes.
techniques you can use to alleviate stress. One of my favorite ones, a psychologist told me, if you have a witness who's really stressed out and scared, you can put the tongue on the top of your mouth. No one can see
Mhm.
you, and that will give you an automatic relaxation effect. I don't know why that
Right.
works, but it's a thing. And no
It
one can
is.
see, but it does help people. And I've given that advice to people. No one can see, no one can tell, but it helps you get through it. So it gives you a chance
Mhm.
to practice those things.
Yeah, definitely. I have a few clients who were struggling with a lot of anxiety before mediation, and we did some guided visualization. I bring in my yoga and other sides of my training and work on visualizing and kind of getting them into the place before they go there, so that when they're in there, they're like, okay, I have practiced my nervous system calming techniques and I can incorporate them while I'm here. And but because there are so many different techniques to use in very stressful situations. But okay, so talking about the 50-50, this one client who's probably going to have to deal with depositions, the ex does not want to give 50-50. And from my experience with the amount of people and friends as well, who, if both parents want 50-50, it's going to take a lot for a judge to agree. From what I can tell, there has to be like a psych evaluation or something, but I want to get your thoughts on this, to say, no, I'm not going to give 50-50 if both parents
Right.
can.
Yeah, there's no presumption in favor of it, but in practice, if it's feasible, if someone lives 150 miles away, you're not going to be able to do 50-50 unless you do all the vacation time with one parent and school time with the
Right.
other. But if you cooperate, you live in fairly close proximity to one
Yeah.
another, your job allows it. So if you've got a traveling parent who's out of town, 3 out of 5 nights a week overnight, you have to be realistic. You may want your children 50-50, you just may not be able to do it. Or you may want your
Mhm.
kids to say, well, I'll take them every weekend instead. So then the other parent never gets any weekend time. But
Yeah.
judges are very open to 50-50. They like it if it works. They're not going
Yeah.
to do it if you can't agree on what color the sky is. You live an hour and a half away, and it means waking up your child at 4:30 in the morning to get them to school
Right.
just so you can have 50-50.
Yeah.
You have to be, how your family operated when you were a family unit is important. If the mom or the dad was home all day and the other parent, again, traveled 3 out of 4 weeks a month, why are we changing that because you're getting divorced?
Right. Right. Yeah. No, I mean, in this case, they both live in town. And so but I think it's a scare tactic when there is some emotional abuse involved or gaslighting of, I'm not going to give you 50-50 and we're going to go to court. And, you know, I have, I think that I can convince the judge that you're not going to get 50-50. It's such a scary thing for a
Mhm.
parent to think that they are going to lose, even because 50% is half of what they normally used to have, but not get 50-50. And I just try to remind people, like, it takes a lot if both parents live in town for a judge to
And
agree
and remember,
that.
there are other schedules between 50-50 and every other weekend. Like I said, if you have 3 overnights out of 7, the other party has 4, it's
Mhm.
really, I mean, and if that's what works,
Yes.
it's now understand there are people who use 50-50 in addition to the reasons you cited to get a reduction in child support. So the way our child support
Mhm.
guidelines work in Florida, they're based on in addition to the incomes of the parties, the number of overnights the children spend with each parent.
Right.
So there are parents who have very little time to spend with their children, but they want 50-50 because it means they will pay less child support. And in my opinion, this is an injustice. I'm not a big fan of the child support deviation, or the 50-50 time sharing. And the concept is you have two households and the children need food at both homes. But I think it's allowed a lot of people who ordinarily might have been more comfortable with an every other weekend schedule with one overnight during the week based on their lifestyle to stand up and say, no, I want 50-50 so that they can get their child support reduced from $1,000 to $600 a month. Now, it's not the intention of the legislature. And sometimes when I've gotten into tussles with people in mediation about 50-50 versus another schedule, I will say, would you agree to this schedule if the support were based on 50-50? Or would you, would you agree to the schedule
Right.
if the support were based on a more traditional schedule? If the 50-50 that's really important, is the money driving this?
Right.
Sometimes people will take a little bit less to have the schedule that they want. And that's something you could do in mediation. You can say, I'll do a 55-45. This is a very typical schedule, which is pretty close to 50 or 60-40. It's very close, but you're going to be paying, but we'll treat the child support as if it were 50-50. Okay. So you get, one person gets the children a little bit more, maybe more weekday time in one household. And then the other parent gets a little break in the child support, but everybody comes away with some of their goals met.
Right. Yeah, that's brilliant. What about, okay, if the divorce is dragging out for a long time and the amount of money of child support that's being given from the one party that has more to the other party, so they're separated for like 2 years,
Right.
and the amount that they get for child support in those 2 years is almost nothing.
Right.
And then when the case settles, finally the child support is dramatically more. Are those 2 years that divorce was taking place, back child support available?
You have a right, yes, you have a right to retroactive child support up to 2 years before the divorce was even filed if you were separated. Okay.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But so, I mean, I'm in one of those cases right now where there's a nominal where the parties are living together. So this is an example where this happens. They're still in the house unhappily, but neither one of them will budge. It's like a chess game, right?
Right.
So when you're in that situation, it does cost you less to live because there's not a rent and a mortgage, right? That you're in one household, there's one
Yeah.
electric bill. So even though it may be uncomfortable, so everyone's needs are going to change when you're in two households. So there could be a retroactive award or not. The court is not required to do it retroactive. So if they continue to live together, maybe in that case, the court won't give them as much of a retroactive award. But what if they separate during the course of the case? So yes, you can get retroactive child support up to 2 years before the case was filed.
Okay. Okay. So this is going pretty long. So I think okay, I have one more question and then we'll close it out for now.
Okay.
If they make it to litigation, like it cannot be finalized in mediation, and it's one party is, it's kind of, can judges see through someone who's a manipulator slash emotional abuser who think that they can pull the wool over? Yeah.
I mean, can I tell you every judge can? No, but many times they do. And I'm going to give you a little piece of advice, something that I do, and I think a client should ask their lawyer to do. Give the judge a preview of the case. It's called a case management conference. Most judges, there are a couple that don't like doing them. If your lawyer asks for a case management conference, it's where everyone comes and you ask for the parties to come. And the judge, you tell the judge, here's what the case is about, and here are the issues we can't resolve. Okay. The judge usually will give you about 30 minutes to an hour, and they will not prejudge your case. They will tell you that, but they're going to say, well, why isn't this resolving? What are the points of view? And they're going to start giving you a hint. Okay, that's not really, you don't want to go down that path. Or, I had a case once where I actually recused a judge because of what they said at a case management conference. I represented a dad. This was not a divorce. It was a paternity case, but he had this child, well, still married to someone else, but he was very dedicated to this child, devoted. I mean, he saw this child twice a day for 5 years. His wife did not know. He had a child with a coworker, and every morning he saw the child, and every evening he saw the child. And the therapist who he had to testify talked about what he wanted. Eventually, he did tell his wife, and of course, this paternity action came. And the therapist testified, that this was like people getting a divorce, and his relationship with his child was as bonded as anybody. And the judge at the case management conference was rather old fashioned, said, I just want you to know from the beginning, I don't treat people who are not married to one another the same. And if you haven't put a ring on it, you don't start with the same rights as a father who's been married to the mother. So I immediately went back to my client and said, we need to recuse the judge and ask him to get out of the case, because he's not going to hear this case the way with an open mind.
Yeah.
So but it's helpful for case management. You get first of all, your clients see what the judge is like, what their personality is like, and you start seeing where the judge is coming from. Well, like on issues like this is the kind of information I want. Because they'll say things like, how many witnesses you're going to have. If someone says 25 witnesses, they're going to say, no, we're not. Why do we need 25 witnesses? Tell me what's important about that. And if you call 25 witnesses, this is where I'm going to start ordering attorney's fees. So judges do this every day. They see these things every day. They're going to start giving you insight into what they're looking for. And if you have the unrealistic client, right, they're going to say, oh, on that 50-50 issue or something like that.
Yeah.
You're going to kind of hear from the judge where they're coming from, and it gives you a sneak preview. And sometimes people go back and say, oh, that's what the judge looks at. Oh, I better rethink settling. It is a Hail Mary. There are times you can settle just because you've gone to case management.
Wow, that is a huge piece of information that I'm going to share with a few people. Thank you for that.
Oh, no problem. All kinds of tricks of the trade.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, this was amazing. Like really, really incredible information. Thank you. I think there are so many people who are going to find this so helpful and give them a lot of things to think about and talk about with their lawyers, or share with their exes to save them from going to court, hopefully. But I really, really appreciate your time, and your expertise is phenomenal. So
thank you. I enjoy this, and I'm going to leave you 2 pieces of advice. Speak up. Make sure your lawyer hears you, right? If you can talk to your spouse, maybe you can't settle the case, and speak up. If you feel you're not being heard, that doesn't mean your lawyer's going to tell you you're right just because you want to be right, but make sure that your voice is involved in the resolution of your case. Don't be a bystander in your own divorce.
I love that. I really love that.
Good. Well, I hope we get to do this again soon, Lee.
All right. Thanks so much. It was nice.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
All right.
Good night.
Bye.